Everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Royal Palace Podcast. Today, we're happy to be here with our friend, Flo. Flo is a actual journalist, sort of, and he is my pal going to protests, and he's also a member of my labor union.
Every federal agent to eliminate rules that don't make sense.
It's the usual French talk of stall and surrender.
All scientists, diners, are footprints. The cultural soul of the nation.
You Americans have given us nothing.
The sense grows very easy. Our planet great again.
Hi, Flo.
Hey, what's up? Patrick and Liam.
And yeah, as usual, we're joined by Liam.
Yeah, hey everyone. So we're going to be talking today about Venezuela. And let's start by Flo. Why don't you introduce yourself briefly?
So I'm a desk journalist and assistant producer at France 24's English channel. I was working on the day shift as the U.S. was kidnapping Maduro and bombing Venezuela, and it unfolded at the beginning of my shift. Later in the day, I went to the rally that was held in Paris where leftists and Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the most prominent leftist figure in France, spoke against the intervention on the evening of January the 3rd. I'm a longtime listener, but this is the first time I'm on the pod. And let's dig in. Let's analyze what happened. Yeah,
absolutely. So you said you were in the offices of France 24, which again, for listeners who don't know, is a international news channel that is broadcast in several languages, including Arabic. Right? I think it's English, French, Spanish, Arabic, and you work in the English section. And people can watch France 24 online on their website. It's a good resource, actually. Great news channel. I was an avid watcher when I first became a Francophile when I was like 14. I used to be my go-to news source, funnily enough.
And oddly enough, it's actually good. I think we mentioned this on our episode about the French sort of media landscape. It's oddly good compared to what people in France actually watch, because that's the other weird thing about France 24, right, Liam?
Oh yeah, it's not really watched. I mean, right, Flo? It's not. Nobody really watches it in France. It's
one of the least popular public channels, but like the most popular is like France 2. So yeah,
because it's outward facing, right? And I know it's really popular in like North Africa. I remember when I went to Morocco, seeing it on both the French and Arabic versions on a lot of places. But yeah, so you were in the newsroom when this happened. That's crazy.
So the U.S. bombed Caracas and other locations in Venezuela at around 2 a.m. Local time. The operation took place in around 30 minutes. At the France 24 office, we were receiving news wires from local press agencies, saying that there were explosions heard in Caracas. It was about 8 a.m. in France at the time, but the first images that we saw of the intervention were broadcasted on Al Jazeera, or at least that's the first channel I saw the images on, at around like 9:30 a.m. And we started broadcasting the same like videos of the explosions and the Chinook Special Forces helicopters that were flying above Caracas at the time. And it was like wild and spectacular just to see the show of force that America was able to rain down upon the Venezuelan capital. It was personally for me, it was like really surprising. And as soon as we got the first wire confirming that Maduro had been captured and abducted, like I was genuinely surprised. Like it was something that I had not expected, even though the U.S. had been carrying out strikes on boats in the Caribbean, alleged drug boats. But for me, it was personally just like, the raw brutality of, American intervention in Latin America laying itself bare. So in the newsroom, things were popping off. We had to schedule a lot of correspondents to come on the channel to talk about the intervention. And in neighboring countries like Colombia, we eventually sent a reporter there. We got reactions from Cuba, from the United States itself, and so as the attack happened at 2 a.m. in Venezuela, one of our correspondents was saying that there was a theory floating around that it could have been a self-coup carried out by a segment of the Venezuelan military. But as soon as we got the images of the Chinook helicopters and Trump's post on Truth Social confirming that it was a U.S. attack, it was clear that, no one else except the U.S. could have done this. 12 sites were struck, including a port, including air bases, including a scientific center. Now, it took a few days, but now, the Interior Minister of Venezuela said that about 100 people had died in the U.S. attack, and similar estimates are coming from U.S. government officials. But despite all of the explosions in the capital, Venezuela's state oil company said that its facilities went unscathed. So now we're dealing with the political aftermath. It's been about 2 weeks since the intervention, and the vice president of Venezuela has now taken the reins. Delcy Rodriguez, Venezuela's former vice president, is now the interim president.
Yeah, I just want to interrupt here to say that it's funny that Flo's talking about how it was a surprise for him at 8 a.m. because for me, the real surprise was when Flo texts me later that day with a poster for a protest coming up that very same day. And it's about Venezuela or whatever. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm against America doing anything to Venezuela, but nothing's happened, right? And then I kind of look at the news and I'm like, oh shit, that's why he sent me that. And so you were actually there covering the protest, not as a part of France 24.
Yeah, just filming independently. So a rally was declared in Paris. The left, figures of the left and the far left, gathered together at Place de la République.
Yeah, so Place de la République is it's a very symbolic square. I would say every left movement tends to start there, or every kind of rally tends to start there. It's a very symbolic place in Paris.
Yep. And the leader of the French left, the most recognizable figure, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, gave a speech denouncing the intervention. This was the night of January 3rd. Maduro had been kidnapped. It was totally confirmed that America had done it. Trump gave a press conference, and Mélenchon started his speech saying all interventions are bad, and he denounced what he called servile press, and he said that the press will try to find justifications for why the U.S. should have intervened and why Maduro is a dictator. La France Insoumise.
He was wrong, by the way. The media has absolutely been on the side of the Palestinian people. Well, that too, but the Venezuelan people on this issue. And they have, we'll get into this a little bit later, but, I'm sure it's the same for our listeners who are in different countries in the world. But you'd be shocked to learn that the French media has very quickly crafted some sort of shaky narrative as to why this was okay. Oh, and by the way, if you guys want to see a video of the video that Flo put together, we put that on our website, but you can also find it on our friend Marlon's Twitter page.
Media in Europe has actually been relatively negative about Trump's intervention. So, for example, Le Monde published an editorial piece. The editorial board of Le Monde, biggest newspaper in France, decried the U.S.'s actions as imperialism. Financial Times, their editorial board in the UK, also published an opinion piece calling the intervention reckless, but it didn't decry it as imperialist because their main argument was that there was no transitional plan for the day after. But France's reaction initially was the national reaction of the government coming from Macron came many hours after, around 9 hours after the intervention. So it took him a while to actually react and respond. But Macron said, without mentioning the methods the US employed, that the Venezuelan people are now free from the dictatorship of Nicolás Maduro, and that he hopes the upcoming transition will be peaceful and democratic. So Macron made no initial mention of how the U.S. just completely bombed a sovereign
Ridiculous.
country and how it kidnapped a leader. Later on in the day, France's foreign minister, Jean-Noël Barrot, he gave an interview in which he said that the methods the U.S. employed were to subvert Maduro were out of line, that it didn't appreciate its methods, but it didn't. He basically stopped short of actually questioning the U.S.'s like brazen use of force.
What kind of methods would he have liked?
Yeah, I mean, like, what is the alternative?
Like he's thinking like, oh no, it should have been like covert, like regime change. Like I don't understand.
I feel like the universal reaction by liberals, both in Europe and the U.S., has been, well, they shouldn't have done this, but we're glad it happened. Like,
yeah, precisely.
Yeah, and I saw that, like just in terms of like this, these are the media reactions like immediately following, well, and political reactions immediately following the events. But like I've seen like this week, for example, I saw a clip with Jean-Luc Mélenchon with they brought on a woman from Venezuela who doesn't live in Venezuela, but she's Venezuelan, and we're having her say things like, how it's good what happened and how Mélenchon has no right to talk about her country or whatever. And it's just like, it's this thing of like, you're right. At the beginning, it was indefensible, at least, on the face of it. But now, they're already building a narrative. But I just wanted to add that, the reaction on the left, I mean, I think there's a Trotskyist element we can get into here, Flo, I know. But there's also, labor unions, including my labor union, the CGT, which very, like, the same day quickly denounced it. And as usual, said that war is never on the side of the working class.
Yeah, so at this emergency rally that happened the day of the intervention, you had, like, after Mélenchon gave his speech denouncing the intervention and the Serval press, some young leftists, they were wearing black hoodies and black balaclavas. They burned an American flag at the foot of the Marianne statue that's at Place de la République. It was pretty epic. They lighted some red flares. And then, soon after, Anas Kazib, the leader of the Révolution Permanente, a small far-left party, Trotskyist party here in France, he took the mic. He spoke out against the intervention also, but he sounded the alarm on future possible interventions, like in Colombia and Haiti, because if the U.S. can do this in Venezuela, it could do this anywhere else. That was the crux of his argument. And then he got to the end of his speech where he reiterated his party's anti-campist stance. So campism is where you have this conception of the world in which the world is divided into major camps of global actors such as the U.S., China, Russia, and campists usually believe that you should take the side of the underdog, of the lesser evil. In this case, in the case of Venezuela, you should support Venezuela in the case of an American intervention. But Trotskyists, part of a far left Marxist current, they believe that you shouldn't choose a lesser of two evils, that you should stay pure ideologically and always take the side of the people in its idealized form. So they believe that Maduro is not a great guy, but they said that the day of the intervention. So they said, like, we don't stand with Maduro or the U.S. Imperialists, and you shouldn't take the side of any of these two evil forces. So people in the crowd started shouting down Anas Kazib and other Trotskyists who had the same position. But what's wild is that, like, they were willing to just say it out loud. I mean, they were, it was the day that Venezuela was bombed, and I am actually partial to that position, that you shouldn't have to take one side or another, that you shouldn't be a campist. I actually do believe that, but it's kind of wild to put that in your speech, when you're talking at a public square in Paris on the day of, like, a major intervention in which, like, at least 2 civilians died and, like, 100 people in total died. Like, and, it was the one moment where leftists can come together and actually denounce U.S. imperialism wholeheartedly. No questions asked. So later in the evening, the Venezuelan envoy, or chargé d'affaires in French, like, she gave a speech that was translated to French. She gave a speech in Spanish. And at the very beginning of her speech, her mic suddenly cut off for about a minute, right as she was going to speak. And then a later speaker said that Trotskyists had tried to prevent her from speaking by not letting her use the mic, which was kind of wild. They also started chanting pro-Maduro slogans like "Long live Maduro," "Free Maduro," etc. And it was wild to see the far left arguments that you often see online on X and other platforms just play out live in front of your face, like where people were articulating their positions and then being shouted down or booed for being anti-campist or being pro-campist. So in the end, it doesn't really matter, because what happened was, like, the Americans just bombed a country, took its leader, and now we're dealing with the aftermath, where you have the ex-vice president who's now assumed power. Today, she said that she had, today, January 15th, she said that she had a good call with Trump. Maduro, even a day before the intervention and his kidnapping, said that he was willing to work with the U.S. to have a dialogue, to be able to iron details out. He was saying if they want oil, Venezuela is ready for U.S. investment, like with Chevron. And despite all these overtures to negotiation and to dialogue with the U.S., Maduro still was abducted and is now
it's being held by the United States. I mean, this whole thing is wild. But, like, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to go maybe too off track on this point, but I feel like, we were talking before we started recording, Flo and I, like, what the hell is going on here? We've heard, we've looked, and we've read all types of different analysis of this stuff, but I still don't think we have a clear picture. I don't know. Do you have any insight, Liam?
On what's happened in general with Venezuela? So I got caught up in that whole Trotskyist point. That's just so beautiful.
Well, we can always go back to the Trotskyists, because, we never talked about Révolution Permanente when we did, like, our early election episodes, where we kind of laid out for our listeners, like, the political scene or whatever.
Because we were talking about electoral parties, and I know they run for things, but
right. Well, that's the kind of funny thing here about Révolution Permanente, which is for the first time they are running candidates in the municipal elections here, which are coming up in March. So we'll definitely have to do an episode about the municipal elections.
It's hard to talk about that kind of thing. I was, just a brief tangent, I went to the rally here in Portland, Maine, where I am currently, on the day of the kidnapping. It was much less exciting than the one in Paris, it sounds like. There was probably about, I don't know, maybe 40 people. No, there's like 30, 40, which is pretty good for a same-day rally in a small city like this. And it was organized by the Party for Socialism and Liberation, who...
They're also Trotskyists.
They're Trotsky. I don't know if they call themselves Trotskyists. Whatever. They're that kind of thing. But they co-organized it, to their credit, with, like, several other groupings, including DSA. But there was, like, 5 or 6 different small Trotskyist parties, most of which I'd never heard of there, which was, again, there was like 40 people or less, so I was sort of impressed by that. And I was also impressed that we can fit that many Trotskyist groups in Maine. But they had a little, nothing like what you were describing in Paris, but they had a little, one of the speakers was sort of implied something insulting about one of the tactics of the other speakers, who was talking about, how we need to support progressive Senate campaigns and so on. And then some other speaker from something called, like, the Revolutionary Communist Group, which I've never heard of, was like, electoralism is no solution, and these little tough. And
hold on, I'm going to defend that. What the hell does Senate elections have any fucking thing to do with the Venezuelan situation. Like, I'm sorry.
Well, okay, this
the
is
Democratic
this
Party,
is a huge tangent now, but
if
basically,
if the Democratic Party didn't do the Venezuelan thing, it was purely like for strategic or like lack of planning or just lack of interest reasons. It was not because there's any sort of moral apprehension in the Democratic Party to doing what they did to Venezuela. I mean, it's Obama. It's Obama who did the initial sanctions that put Venezuela in the situation it is today.
To extend this unnecessary tangent even further, it was because there was a Senate candidate there, Graham Plattner. I don't know if you've heard of this guy. He's gotten some traction online. He's like the new left-wing candidate that everyone's talking about.
Never heard of him.
No, but
you'd be surprised I don't follow main politics.
No, I know, but but he's like gotten sort of national traction, sort of like not in the same way as Zoran, but whatever. He's the new guy, the new left-wing hope that everyone's talking about. And then he had this, and he's anti-imperialist and so on. And then he had this scandal where he has like a Nazi tattoo. He used to be in the Marines. You're making a face like you heard of this, yeah.
Oh, that guy. Okay,
that's a whole other thing. But anyway, he was there and he was saying that like there was a vote in the Senate like a few weeks before the intervention to try to block the U.S. from intervening in Venezuela. And it was defeated by a few votes, one of which was our local senator here, Susan Collins, that he's running against. So it was because of that specifically.
I see. Well, I guarantee you, if Congress had passed that, there is no way this intervention would have happened.
Yeah.
Because
I
we
agree.
respect internal law, just not international law. We love due process.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you hear people say that about like, oh, this wasn't authorized by Congress, which is just
like, when has it ever been authorized?
Exactly, yeah. But anyway, I was telling people afterwards about this rally here, because people heard I went, and not many people heard about it because it was so last minute. And I was just saying, well, yeah, there's all these different Trotskyist groups, and like everyone I said this to here was like, what is Trotskyism? What are Trotskyist groups? And I was like, I can't answer that. I don't. Maybe we need to bring an expert on here to.
Oh, but you can't. No. You know why you can't bring on an expert? Because they're inevitably going to belong to a faction.
Right. Well, right. Of course. That's almost definitional.
That's going to tell you about how their faction is the only true inheritor of the Trotskyist ideal, and everyone else is traitors or whatever.
That's the problem. There's no way to know.
Have y'all heard of Posadism?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a wacky one. That's the Argentine guy who is into aliens, right?
Yeah. Who thought that like aliens should destroy the Earth and then we should rebuild socialism from zero.
Yeah, because building socialism from zero went so well in the Soviet Union.
Anyway, enough of a tangent about Trotskyism. Let's get back to Venezuela. What did you ask me that started me on that?
Patrick? Oh no. Well, it's just like before we got on this call, we were talking about just like, why did the U.S. do this? Like, what was it actually obtained by doing any of this? And it just doesn't feel obvious, right? We covered or we could talk about the oil element here, but like I was listening actually to what Adam too said about this, and he was kind of like, yeah, I don't actually see any economic reason to do this, especially not for oil. So it kind of just feels like mainly a power play, at least for the moment.
It's so hard to analyze anything the U.S. government is doing right now.
It's like criminology.
Yeah. Clearly, Trump is not thinking about anything in a way that can be explained, right? So, and clearly he does care about the oil. Even if, as Tu said, it's actually will require too much investment and oil is too cheap for anyone to want to invest in extracting more oil in Venezuela.
And importantly, that oil will never go down in price in a world of growing electrification.
Although I will say, that doesn't necessarily mean that the American oil companies won't do it, because all these big American corporations, it's been very clear they're willing to sink several tens or hundreds of billions of dollars into boondoggles to satisfy Trump. Or even the foreign companies like Sony and the chip makers and so on. They're all willing to do something that is a waste of money, like trying to build chip factories in the U.S. Because the president wants it. But anyway, obviously Trump does care about the oil. He keeps saying it. At the same time, clearly there's a whole American government apparatus that other people who want these kind of things. It's not just Trump. And I don't really believe this would have gone through if it was just Trump. Clearly, like, there's like a faction around Rubio that really, I think they want probably Rubio just cares about Cuba.
Yeah, exactly. Like he would have greenlit this on the sole basis that this means no oil for Cuba, which means easier to go after Cuba.
Although, you know what's the funny thing is that Cuba doesn't actually get much oil from Venezuela the past few years because Venezuelan oil production...
since the sanctions, right?
Yeah, Venezuelan oil production has been crushed by the past few years, like the sanctions, and then apparently most people who, like, most of their skilled technical people, engineers and stuff, have left because of the terrible economic crisis. I mean, nearly like a quarter of Venezuela's population is left. And so now they get most of their oil from Mexico, funnily enough, which is also on the list of countries that Trump is threatening to do this to again, which is definitely another part of it, right? The new Monroe Doctrine or the Donroe Doctrine.
God, I hate it whenever someone says that. It just, oh my God.
It's so stupid and embarrassing, but this whole thing is so stupid and embarrassing that, might as well use it. But he really explicitly threatened Gustavo Petro in Colombia, obviously Cuba, but also Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico. Although he likes her on a personal level. He even said that when he threatened her. He's like, I really like Claudia. She's a great woman, but she needs to be careful, or something to that effect.
It's funny. I think, Liam, we've spoken about this before because, like specifically about Mexico, where, when I was living there, it kind of didn't really make any sense to me, like why there was this kind of strong move on the part of AMLO, who was the president at the time, the leftist president at the time, to concentrate. Like he did a massive concentration and centralization of the armed forces and police in Mexico, and he had a lot of reasons for it, and who knows if his reasons were actually explanatory, like if he was actually anticipating something like Trump. But one thing is clear: his massive investment and centralization in the armed forces will serve Mexico well if the U.S. ever decides to do anything.
Yeah, though they still couldn't stand up currently against the American armed forces, probably. But yeah, Mexico is one of the most vassalized countries in the world, and they're so economically dependent on the U.S. And I do think it's a long-term project of Morena to try to move away from that. But it's a very slow process, getting investment from China, trying to diversify their exports and so on. And now the Trump tariffs are going to force them to do that even more. But clearly, they're walking a thin line where you have to do that while at the same time sort of ass-kissing Trump as necessary, so he won't. Because I saw some theories that Trump was personally bothered by the way Maduro has been on social media since August, since obviously he wanted him to roll over.
So he probably has an ex-viewer account then.
Trump? Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
So he's just on X and then commenting on the tweets via Truth.
Well, he still has an account on Twitter, but he doesn't. Supposedly he doesn't use it, but he's definitely seeing these things, right? He's there's no way that scrolling Truth Social is fun, even for Trump. What is even on there?
I can't imagine.
Anyway, what do you think, Flo? What's your and what are you hearing people say around? Or what do you think? What happened? Why?
In terms of international reactions?
Well, first of all, let's just start with why do you think? What's your personal theory about why Trump did this?
Call the balls and strike. Call it like you see it.
I think it's something that he's wanted to do for a while. I mean, there's reports saying that the intervention and the kidnapping of Maduro had been planned out since early December, right? And as y'all said, Marco Rubio wants to undermine Cuba. There was a failed attempt to do regime change in 2018 that got thwarted with special ops forces.
To be clear, it got thwarted in the same way that me showing up to an exam an hour late after not having studied or whatever, resulted in me failing that exam.
Yeah, so even though the attempt was unsuccessful back during the Trump 1 term, I think this has been in the works for a little while, and Trump also could want to have something on his record going into the midterms. That's what a lot of pundits have said. But also, like, maybe Trump has this mercantilist view of like world resources and economics, where you just have to have the most resources to be able to sell the most resources. I mean, during his press conference after the intervention, he just said, like, we're going to sell Venezuela's oil to China, to Russia. So even if it would take a lot of money to refine that oil, it's part of his modus operandi, to accumulate as much as possible for the US and for its national strategic interests. And eventually that's what he says he wants to do with Greenland. So that makes me ask the question, like, why are other Western European nations still in NATO if they really cling to democracy and the rule of law? Then why should we be the vassals of the US? And I think France should have left NATO a long time ago, but
Charles de Gaulle, guys, bring him back.
I think we should talk more about NATO at the end of this episode, because I think that the natural way we can end this is talking about Greenland, which appears to be the next fascination, because they didn't succeed in regime change in Venezuela.
Yeah,
not
that's
the way anyone
funny thing.
means. I mean, they kidnapped the president, which is insane, but it's just his vice president in charge now. And what do you see happening next? Do you think the U.S. is going to do any more? They're going to kidnap her too?
I mean, for right now, Delcy Rodriguez, the interim president, is pretty favorable to the U.S. She just got off a call today, said it was good. She's been willing to dialogue with the U.S., and even Maduro himself was willing to strike a deal and accept U.S. investment in oil, in Venezuelan oil. So the situation was already bad to begin with. It's not like the U.S. really needed to intervene in the first place. But the fact that it did is really troubling. Like, now we're seeing protests in Iran. It's actually a legitimate question whether or not the U.S. will intervene in Iran. It's moved soldiers out of its bases in Qatar, and who knows if it's preparing for Iranian reprisals if it's going to somehow attack or support protesters in Iran. I don't have any prognostic. I don't have like, only the future will tell. But the U.S. logistically can intervene anywhere in Latin America, and I mean, it's already deposed a major leader in a major country there.
It's fascinating how the Trump administration has probably been one of the first administrations in a while that has actually understood, like, what the American military is actually good at. Like, we've always known for a while that, like, the special forces aspect of sending someone in and using them to kill someone is the thing we're really good at. We're not really good at winning wars. We're not good at ground invasion. But that kind of, like, asymmetrical thing, where just because of our military might, we can get someone in and out real quick out of somewhere. And, because, like, I could totally see that the reason maybe the Biden or Obama administration did not try to do Venezuela was because they were not yet sure of the, either more covert ways of regime change. Well, I mean, they were doing that anyway, but they were definitely not sure of the possibilities of, like, doing a ground invasion. Whereas it seems like Trump was just like, we're not going to do anything we're not good at here. And, because that's what I think a lot of people would have liked, right? Like the Machado types, they would have loved the U.S. to go in and occupy a la Iraq, a la Afghanistan or whatever. And all this talk about Greenland and all this stuff, like, none of this is talking, like, no one is talking about doing any actual, anything more than just what America's good at.
I want to maybe talk a little bit more about the reaction in France and the media reaction. We touched on that, but, since you mentioned Maria Corina Machado as
our girl, friend of the pod.
Well, she, a peacemaker, Nobel Peace Prize recipient, although it seems like she might give that away. Which is incredible.
Yeah, groveling to Trump, saying she would give up her Nobel Peace Prize.
Which, by the way, is so insulting. Like, dude, if you were Donald Trump, the last thing you want is someone he thinks is a loser giving you her Nobel Peace Prize.
And the Nobel Prize Committee said that it's impossible to transfer your awarded prize. So
That'd be great if it was, though, if you could sell it.
Maybe you could turn it into NFTs and sell parts of it.
He's already got the FIFA Peace Prize too, which is obviously much more prestigious. But has she been on, or people like her from let's call it the extreme right of the Venezuelan opposition? Have they been on French TV much? Have they been given much coverage in France in the way they have in the US?
Let me check.
As far as I know, not in the US. Because Machado's just she lives on CNN, doesn't she?
I mean, we were covering the opposition back in 2024 when the last Venezuelan election happened. And yeah, as soon as she won the Peace Prize, we covered that as well. Covered her press conference. Yeah, but we've had on correspondents who have talked about the opposition and who've been relatively pro-opposition, I would say. I remember the day of, we had one correspondent from Venezuela who was talking very positively about the opposition and how the capture of Maduro would probably lead to a little bit of breathing room for political opponents. And it's true, Venezuela does have a lot of political prisoners. It just released, according to itself, it released 400 political prisoners in the past couple of days. Rights groups say that it's only about 70 that were released. So we'll see if more political prisoners do get released, but it's not like the center-right opposition really has the everyday working man in mind.
No, clearly not.
I
mean, Machado was openly calling for U.S. intervention before she got awarded the prize. So,
yeah, I mean, everything I've seen on French television, which is only the best of the best, I assure you people, is mainly using this to talk about the need for French militarism. That's the way I 9 times out of 10 what I've seen in terms of clips are hey guys, America just did this, Greenland is next, is Europe going to do anything about it? And then you get this weird double discourse where some French official says, it's really serious what's happening with the United States and sovereignty and blah, blah, blah. And it's not okay if they go for Greenland or whatever. But, so therefore we need to militarize, but also we will not do anything in case Greenland's attacked, has been one of the themes I've been seeing lately.
Well, I wonder if part of this is something I've been seeing a lot in the American liberal media is the immediate take being that this Don Roe doctrine, what the real risk of this is? It's China and Russia. Would you believe that? For example, here's a New York Times headline from January 6th. How the Don Roe doctrine reinforces Xi's vision of power in Asia. So, yeah. So I've seen this all over the place, but the New York Times has been running with it hard. So, the big danger of the U.S. acting like this in Venezuela is that it could embolden China to act like this and to invade Taiwan, or it could embolden Russia to kidnap Zelensky or whatever, which I think is an absolutely insane way to react to the U.S. doing something bad, is to say, well, the big problem with this is it could embolden China.
I mean, I do think the correct way to read it, though, of maybe not specifically the Venezuelan invasion, but generally the position of the Trump administration is it's much more realistic about what its actual military position is in the long term in Asia. I think it's a fantasy that we'll be able to defend Taiwan. I think maybe the Trump administration has figured that out too. Whereas the liberal establishment has always refused that notion. They're not willing to see the writing on the wall.
Liam, the take that you just mentioned, I mean, it actually makes sense. I had colleagues who were saying, well, if China does invade Taiwan tomorrow, the U.S. has no high moral ground to be able to say, don't invade Taiwan. Like the U.S. just took out a sovereign leader of a sovereign country. And even if 2024's elections are highly contested, right, it just brazenly bombed a country in one night. And if China were to do the same, then the U.S. would be hypocrites for saying like that China shouldn't intervene. So
Yeah, but
from a leftist,
When has that never been the case?
yeah, haven't the U.S. been hypocrites for a while? Like they became hypocrites about Ukraine so quickly with the Gaza thing.
yeah,
Also, this isn't the first
Iraq,
time. I
Afghanistan.
haven't heard a lot of people talking about this, but this isn't actually the first time the U.S. has kidnapped a leader of a Latin American country. They kidnapped
Noriega.
It was done
Panama.
more. Well, Noriega, yeah, that's true. Noriega, but like we invaded there, which feels more respectable. But we did something kind of similar in 2004 in Haiti. You know about this one with Jean-Bertrand Aristide?
Oh yeah,
This one's less well known than Noriega, but and we did it more covertly, but it was kind of a similar thing where we fomented unrest against Aristide. The U.S. jointly with the French. Well, the story at the time of what happened is that there was widespread revolts and opposition to President Aristide, and the U.S. offered him to get him out of the country, and flew him out of the country on an American plane, and then he went into exile in South Africa. But he claimed, and this was then confirmed in the New York Times by French officials in 2022, that he was just kidnapped by American special forces. And then and the U.S. claimed that's not what happened, but this is what he's always claimed. And yeah, it's a crazy reveal in 2022 that the French official said, no, yeah, we planned this with the U.S. because Aristide was getting back into that old topic of asking France to repay the massive amount of money that it made Haiti pay in compensation for the land confiscated from slave owners back in the
1800s.
And so the U.S. and France jointly engineered this kidnapping of him. So not even the first time we've done this. So I just find the argument that this, does this embolden other countries to do similar things? I mean, yes, but I'm more concerned about the U.S. doing this. Like China hasn't ever done anything like this.
Sorry, but
and I find it weird to be.
If China's emboldened, it's not because look, the U.S. can do it. It's emboldened because look at those idiots over there. Like they're so incapable and stupid. Like.
Yeah.
But not specifically because they chose to go for Venezuela. It's just more of a general thing.
I think regardless, like our opposition to American imperialism and Chinese aggression on its neighbors, like those are two separate things. I mean, China is the lesser evil. Like it has historically intervened in other countries like Vietnam in the 80s. It supported Cambodia and Pol Pot's regime at the time.
That's true. That was bad, but that was back when Chinese foreign policy was aligned with American foreign policy.
Yeah, exactly.
Like they did both of those things sort of on our behalf.
Yeah, and the U.S. also wanted to undermine Vietnam
Yeah.
at the time of its birth as a republic, as a socialist republic. But like all the more reason for the left to hate American imperialism. Like we can still criticize other great powers like Russia, invading Ukraine, and China butting heads with its neighbors as well. But the great Satan in all of this is the U.S. By a huge magnitude.
Yeah.
I also think, and this is maybe where I diverge a little bit from where I agree with you, Flo, and diverge from the Trotskyist line. I see the world not as kind of options between these powers, but I see everything through the kind of the lens of the US, in the sense that like the actions of all other powers are necessarily dictated by the world, or the conditions that is created by the world controlled by the US. So in that kind of lens, anything China does is merely a reflection of the US position in a way. Like I don't mean to be too reductionist about that, but I do mean that like the world we have is a world in which it is the US or someone else. That doesn't mean someone else winning always means a win for the people. Of course not. But I certainly don't see it as like, I don't see China's actions as identical to America's, nor its aspirations.
It takes away a little bit of agency Takes away a little bit of agency from China there, probably too much. But I sort of generally
No, but
agree.
the choices that China has at its disposition are the ones that, necessarily are kind of caused by the world that America's created.
I agree, especially if we're talking about a lesser power like Venezuela. If you're a country like Venezuela, or Iran, you're entirely operating within the U.S. system. You have no choice. And so I don't like this Trotskyist line of like, U.S. is bad, Maduro is also bad. Like, no, I don't think Maduro has handled. Well, I don't think he's been a good president for Venezuela. I don't think he's handled the past few years well. But the main reason Venezuela is in as terrible shape
because of sanctions
right now is because of sanctions by the U.S. And it's in really terrible shape. But like, I feel like that both sidesism position sort of erases that. And it gets being like, well, everyone's bad. It's like, well, but this is because of one side. This is because of one actor. And the majority of bad things happening in the world right now are because of the American system, the actions of America and its allies. And even like Ukraine, obviously, Ukraine's like a more complicated position, but it's still like this situation was created by the U.S. starting from after the fall of the Soviet Union and everything that's happened since.
I agree with like the position that Patrick articulated, and I think that, at the end of the day, the U.S. is still the global hegemon, so it is responsible for most of the world's evils. And also, minor powers can still be evil in their own way, through environmental destruction, through negligence of human rights, democracy, etc. But yeah, I think my position is somewhere in between the campus and Trotsky's position, where like it's kind of what you articulated, Patrick.
Yeah, and of course we're gonna get a bunch of emails from every Trotskyist faction after this episode. But obviously, there are nuances in kind of this. We're definitely caricaturizing a bit some of the reactions to this, but sometimes not too much, but not always. But I do think the essential position, though, that we shouldn't take sides in conflicts is true. I mean, but I don't think it's taking a side in a conflict to defend Maduro here. Taking a side would be to just unconditionally say you love the Maduro regime. But like, what is there to critique about the Maduro regime in this specific scenario? Like,
of the kidnapping.
Yeah. It's completely, as I was trying to say, it's a situation imposed on by the US. It's not like, it's not like Maduro poked the dog. Like,
what really gets me is like, what if a left-wing government were to take power here in Western Europe, right? Like, would the US be able to pull off some interventionist assault or espionage
operation?
operation?
Just cancel the election like the EU did in Romania. I mean, with a right-wing guy in that case. But I just want to mean, like, they don't let that stuff happen.
Holy shit, that'd be wild.
No, the gloves are still on for Western Europe.
Well, yeah, let's talk about Europe. So first of all, what are the reactions of other European leaders besides the pathetic Emmanuel Macron been?
Pedro Sanchez, contrary to Macron, he actually did denounce the US's illegal intervention, and he called it like a violation of international law.
Ooh, got him there.
And what's really embarrassing for Europe is that Sanchez, Spain released a joint statement on this condemning it, but not with other European countries, but with Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Uruguay. Which, because the EU and other European leaders have been taking such embarrassing positions on this, right?
I think the EU Commission, let me check.
Liam, do you want to explain for our American listeners who Kaja Kallas is?
Kaja Kallas is a Estonian witch.
It means that not as any
not
sort
in a
of
sexist
slander,
way, but
not as any sort of slander, but it's actually a good thing. He appreciates that about her.
She's a pagan. Now, she's a horrible Estonian woman who is currently the vice president of the European Commission and I forget what exactly the title is.
It's basically the Europe's diplomat.
She's the head of EU foreign policy.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean a lot, but it does mean she gets to make statements that are reported on as if they had carried any weight. And yeah, she's horribly right-wing, very, very aggressive hawk against Russia.
Well, and one of the funniest things she said a couple months ago was about how like China and China was not like on the right side of World War II or something like that, or nor Russia. Like there's a great clip that people should look up if they ever have time. But it's so funny. She's like talk like basically giving people a history lesson, and it's all wrong.
Here was her statement on January 3rd. I have spoken with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and our ambassador in Caracas. The EU is closely monitoring the situation in Venezuela. Thank God. The EU has repeatedly stated that Mr. Maduro lacks legitimacy and has defended a peaceful transition. Under all circumstances, the principles of international law and the UN Charter must be respected. We call for restraint. The safety of EU citizens in the country is our top priority. So, yeah, kind of like Macron's statement, completely lacking any condemnation of the U.S., other than the extremely oblique one about international law. But people need to respect international law. We urge restraint without
very vague.
All sides. Also, who are we urging restraint to? Just in general.
And that's not any sort of condemnation of any sort of covert action. They're just mad that, not even mad, they're just trying to cover themselves for things that are so blatant like this.
When I Googled Kaja Kallas, the main headlines that come up from recently is that she's made some statement. EU Chief Diplomat Kallas, world's woes mean it's time to start drinking. Kallas told leaders of the political groups in the European Parliament that, well, she's not much of a drinker, and now may be the time to start, given events around the globe, according to two people in the room. I do agree that Kaja Kallas should start drinking heavily on the job.
I would be able to finally get through the press conferences at work.
I think that is sort of indicative. I mean, obviously, I'm sure she was joking there, but like kind of indicative of how European leaders see their role in the world, which is that they think they have no power whatsoever. Which is untrue, which is because Europe could. It's the biggest economy in the world. I mean, you know, the Euro bloc, like Europe obviously would have power if it was willing to act independently from the US. And now we're talking about this even more, right? Because of Greenland, because as you said, Trump has moved on, and now it's all about Iran and Greenland. And he met with the Danish foreign minister, Rasmussen, and Vance did yesterday, I think, and said, and they came out of it, and they said they would form a joint task force to talk about. But Trump then immediately said again, we want Greenland, we'll take it by force if necessary, basically. And Denmark has been pretty clear they are not going to allow that.
Yeah, with their army of penguins in Greenland, they're going to resist an American intervention.
Didn't you hear that all the top European countries are sending troops to Greenland? You heard about this?
Oh, really?
So the UK has sent 1 troop. France has sent 15, and the Germans have sent 13. I'm not making that up.
Nice.
They are doing joint drills on Greenland right now with too few people to man a ship.
Dude, imagine being in that squad, just like...
I mean, my theory there is they're just, they need those soldiers to like welcome the Americans when they come.
There are also, that still means there are more American troops currently on Greenland than there are European troops that are allowed to be there in the Pituffik space base, formerly the Thule Air Base, which, God, remember how the Space Force still exists? That's a thing?
Yeah.
Yep. Don't know what they're doing there, but there's apparently 150 American troops stationed there. And still, European countries can't commit to sending more than that. We don't want them to feel threatened or anything. Or kicking them out. Surely that's what you do immediately in this, is say, leave. Like, immediately. You can come back if we sort this out.
In a context where you're not willing to do anything about it, you're not going to say kick them out, because who's going to show them the door?
Right. But, I mean...
I've seen on French TV clips of people saying just remarkable things where they take like a strong tone about how, going after Greenland would be unacceptable. But then when the journalist naively asks them, "Oh, will this trigger Article 5 of the NATO treaty?" And they're like, we'll have to see when that moment comes. Which, I mean, is just insane. I mean, it's insane.
Right. Surely you could... I mean, God.
Like, I mean, they're already, in my view, they're already preparing to hand it over, which is crazy because like they don't have to, like they don't have, like they could at least lie about it, like go on TV and say, like France could say this would be unacceptable and we'll go to war against the United States, but thankfully they'll be so scared of our power that they won't try. But they're too scared to say that.
I will give Denmark credit that they do not seem to have any intention to do that. But like I think they know. Obviously, they know they have no capability to resist the U.S. alone if there was a military confrontation. And you're right that it's crazy the way the other European powers are sort of backing down from this in advance. Like if Trump tomorrow says, "Okay, the 150 troops we currently have in Greenland are seizing it," I think the Europeans would do nothing.
Can you just imagine like the movies we'll make after this? Just like a bunch of guys in a pickup truck or whatever getting the call in like Greenland, be like, "It's go time, boys." They just hop in the back of a pickup and they, are like, "All right, this is ours now." And
well, it probably takes very far to get from where they are to the
they'd have to
capital,
fly.
to be fair,
They'd have to
have to fly. It's a big island, and that's why we want it. I'm pretty sure that's why we want it, is because it's a big
it's big
island.
on a map.
Because they keep seeing the strategic thing. It's like we have territory in the Arctic.
Yeah, it's in
we have
Greenland.
Alaska.
Well, and it's also the base in Greenland.
Well, and we currently have a base in Greenland. Yes,
And we have a bunch of allies. I mean, Finland, Sweden just joined NATO, right? Yeah, Canada is part of the alliance.
So apparently, this was reported in The Guardian today, that apparently the reason for the origin of Trump's interest in this is his friend Ronald Lauder, who's a billionaire, who's the heir to the Estee Lauder fortune, the makeup company. And he apparently was the one who got him into the idea of buying Greenland in 2018. And this is what John Bolton said. And that this guy has been recently buying up a lot of, making deals, mineral deals or whatever, rare earths deals in Greenland. And so it's just some guy that he's friends with who wants this. And Trump's nothing if not a good friend.
According to Trump, though, like he said before that we don't need the minerals. It's mostly just for strategic military reasons to be able to counter China. A lot of it comes down to...
I believe that's his concern. I don't think he really cares about minerals, but it's less exciting than oil, isn't it? Rare earth mineral, like, come on, boring. But probably there are some people there who would be very happy to get this.
God, can you imagine just how awful it would be the first Walmart that gets built over there?
But returning to Venezuela, NATO allies have reacted to the American attack. Iceland is apparently the only country that has officially condemned the intervention. And there's a host of countries that have actually supported it.
They're probably worried that America will accidentally invade Iceland and not Greenland.
Italy, Albania, Croatia, and North Macedonia have supported the American attack. A lot of other countries have said that they would call for de-escalation, including aforementioned Spain, even though the prime minister said it was against international law. In Hungary, Orban has said that he basically tacitly supports the intervention, saying it'll allow America to have more oil resources, that
is so bizarre because this reminds me of Marine Le Pen's post on this. She was one of the only outside of the left, one of the only political leaders in France to condemn the kidnapping of Maduro, and she was basically who cares what Maduro is as a president? One thing is unacceptable, and that is violating the sovereignty of another nation.
Yeah, and I will give her credit for consistency in her sovereignist position there, which is not common on the European far right.
No.
They most of them, like Orban or Meloni, they embrace American domination. They fantasize about it.
Yeah, there's definitely it's definitely died down so much since Charles de Gaulle, but there definitely remains a sovereigntist current in France of people who don't necessarily have a great like who come from different like ideological backgrounds, but their whole kind of thing resumes from like anti-EU, anti-American dominance. It just doesn't have a lot of political weight.
Yeah, I do think the European, I mean the French political culture and elite is one of the most skeptical of the U.S. in Europe. Still too servile, but
well, Macron is like the definition of like the France turning like totally towards the U.S. You know what I mean?
Sarkozy was even more so. But yeah, Macron is also, yeah.
I mean, we're still part of NATO. We're still part of the EU. So concretely, even if Macron has said that NATO is a brain dead institution,
did he say that?
Still in it? Yeah, I think back in 2017.
Huh, I must have missed that one. Brain dead. You know, the just the general talk of militarism reminds me that when I was walking work the other day, I realized that everywhere there's now ads for joining the French military. Bus stops,
Yeah.
tobacs, everywhere.
You could be one of the lucky 15 sent to Greenland.
Well, they're also opening a consulate, I think, in Greenland now. All of a
Yes,
sudden.
yeah, that's true.
Why? I don't know. Maybe to help organize the departure of all the French people?
All the French people in Greenland. There's probably someone.
There's one guy.
Yeah, Francois. He's the chef on the
One
US
guy on a
military
farm
base.
with a bunch of penguins.
So, Flo, you are a Frenchman as well as an American.
Yep.
Do you think there's any hope of this current chaos shaking France and Europe in general out of its sort of Atlanticist delusions, its suicidal dependence on the U.S.?
Well, I would hope so, but that would depend on the left winning, right?
Yeah.
Mélenchon's party, La France Insoumise, has always been anti-NATO. It seems as if like people don't have an appetite for U.S. interventionism, and it doesn't seem as if like these anti-interventionist protests are really picking up so much traction as we saw with Palestine in France, because like every week, every Saturday, there would be major pro-Palestinian protests, and at a certain point, Macron had to concede by in the beginning when there was protests starting in like end of 2023, beginning of 2024. He had to allow protests to take place. His interior minister was against them initially, and then he recognized Palestine. We're not really seeing the same thing. 2 weeks after the intervention in Venezuela, we're not seeing a massive uptick in solidarity with Latin America. Protests remain relatively marginal, where it's mostly the left that is congregating, and like the remnants of the pro-Palestinian movement that is going to these rallies. And I don't know what would upset the France's ties to the U.S. I think it really depends on just a strong left-wing force coming into power and actually, leaving NATO. And it's technically possible. A NATO member can leave. It just has to declare within 1 year that it wants to leave. But
can you imagine giving that notice and like still participating? It's like, oh well, the rule says we still have to participate for a year. But I did want to say that in terms of like the one thing I do think this does change at least a little bit, and it's totally anecdotal, is this is the first time in France I've actually had people be like, what the hell, America? Like it's the first time my colleagues have been like, what the hell is going on in your country? Or like, what is wrong with you people? Like, it's been this.
It's definitely delegitimizing. I mean, not just this, but everything the U.S. has been doing for the past few years, even before Trump, is delegitimizing the U.S. in the eyes of many, many Europeans. Although, again, the elite of pretty much every European country is still trapped in their little suicidal Atlanticist bubble and completely unwilling to even imagine getting out of it.
And even with like the recent ICE shootings in Minnesota, same thing. Even domestic issues in the U.S. are proving that it's not able to keep order and stability within its own borders. It's not proving itself to be, the harbinger of, or it's not being the standard bearer of democracy that it pumps itself up to be. So the EU, France, we have a choice, and current neoliberal and center-left governments across the continent are not standing up to the US. So that leaves one option: the populist radical left that hasn't been yet tried.
Yep. Unfortunately, seems like we're going in the opposite tendency across Europe.
Yep.
But yeah, part of that is, as you say, that the current few center-left governments that still remain are just as unwilling as the right to stand up to the U.S. at all. Even Pedro Sanchez in Spain, who has said better things than any other European leader has not made any moves to say, there are lots of American troops and American military bases in Spain, and he hasn't even dared to suggest, nor as far as I know, as anyone in the Socialist Party in Spain, that they should be asked to leave, or that even if it wasn't like kick them out, like he could at least say, let's try to wind that down, let's try to have strategic autonomy, get rid of it. Not at all.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and Rhoda specifically is like it's a joint base, so at least they have a couple guys there who can show America the door.
Well, most American bases in Europe are, in theory, joint bases, including the one in Greenland. That makes the Europeans feel a little bit better about it, not just being an occupationary force, but instead a force that's defending Europe against tyranny, as it's doing very well. Yeah, and if we get involved in another war in Iran, which looking like this could happen, it's once again, just like with Iraq and Afghanistan, going to be American bases on European soil, especially southern Italy and southern Spain, that are the launching off points for the planes that are going to be bombing civilians in Tehran. Again, just as what happened in Iraq, just as in Libya, as in Syria, this is happening. European soil is needed for this, or I'm sure the U.S. could find a workaround, but it's still all this stuff is done with the complicity of European powers and has been for decades, even when they do oppose it, as a lot of them did with Iraq.
Yeah, and even when they oppose it, they're still involved. Like when the whole Iraq adventure happened, and France, what they prevented American planes from landing, right?
And France could get away with that because France thankfully doesn't have any permanent American military presence, thanks to.
Yeah, but even then,
the
French defense complex was still involved in the war. So it's
same as like with Israel.
Exactly. And so I don't know. I think if Sam was on this podcast, he'd agree with what all three of us are saying, that Europe needs, if it has any chance to do anything, it does need some definition of defense, but all movement we've seen in that direction and anti submission in the US, but all movement in like a defense direction just seems to be buying more American weapons, becoming more invested in the United States. Like this military promotion campaign that France has been on, and they've for our listeners, they've also introduced like a new program to get more and more young people involved in joining the military. Like all of this stuff is oriented at no definition of defense, but rather like Ukraine / pumping up the defense sector. Like it's kind of unclear to me actually what these people imagine these new militaries are going to look like, but it definitely is not any sort of like breakaway from the U.S. or any actually autonomy, like to gain any actual autonomy in what defending Europe looks like.
Do you guys think this now mask off reckless imperialism will help the French anti-imperialist left?
I think French people are more focused on domestic issues. Even back in 2022, when the full-scale invasion of Ukraine happened, our national elections were in April. So French people were still focusing more on inflation, which was high around the post-COVID inflation boom. And that mattered more to voters, unfortunately, than the international situation with Ukraine. And even with even with Gaza, I think that the outcry for human rights in Gaza is an inflection point in the sense that like the left can always bring this up as a failure of Macron's government, but what will get voters out to the polls on election day will be the bread and butter issues of like the economy, of immigration. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, Le Pen and her protege Bardella are still like really high in the polls. There's also the French farmers' protests against Mercosur, which are largely supported by far-right union Coordination Rurale, the far-right farmers union. So those issues are still much more pertinent to a lot of voters than international issues. But it doesn't mean that the left can still, like, the left has the moral high ground on these issues, right? On interventionism, on human rights violations in Gaza, on U.S. hypocrisy, on NATO's hypocrisy. So, like, we should still highlight these issues while keeping in mind that voters are going to turn out for their pocketbooks.
Maybe you guys will disagree with me on this, but I also happen to think that the left in France has not always played its cards right on these kind of issues, especially getting legitimacy to talk about these issues, because not even the far right in France really contests on foreign policy that much, and like La France Insoumise has on occasion failed to rise to the occasion, like specifically with Ukraine, where they they kind of bring up a very Democrat, like American Democrat kind of argument to why the Ukraine war shouldn't be fought the way it's fought. And that's, we didn't kind of follow due process, if you will. Like we didn't, if it was our parliament, we could have decided to help Ukraine. And I think that loses some of the moral high ground. I mean, we're still more right than they are, but I think that doesn't help. Because for me, the policy is no wars, and we're not gonna send the working class off to war, regardless what the reason is. And on the other side, you also have the fact that the France Insoumise is unwilling to go back to its old position on the EU, which they strategically kind of backed away from, like Frexit stuff, because it wasn't kind of the right moment. But I kind of feel like we are in that moment now, where the anti-EUism is so much more popular among the people than I think it was 10 years ago. And if you want to make the political debate about foreign policy and sovereignty, and like if you want to bring voters into a world in which there's like into which that's like a major part of why people vote, well, you have to actually have a difference between the parties on these issues. And I think that's one of the things that prevents it from being an issue, that there really isn't a significant difference between the far left, far right, or the center on the EU, for example.
I think the left sometimes fails to connect foreign policy to domestic policy well enough, because it is deeply connected, and the EU question is related to that, like, and that was the whole
these farmer protests, by the way.
Yeah,
I guess Mercosur is a case in point. Polling still says that the majority of people in France support the EU, so it would be a difficult position to take, to be straight up like Frexit, to be pro-Frexit. Mélenchon and La France Insoumise have taken the position that we should stay within the EU and disobey its treaties, so that we can have more social spending, for example. But like, regardless of what stance we take on the EU, I think a more realistic foreign policy position that we could have is like getting out of NATO, especially with Trump in power, right? Because when Biden was in power, it was like people were not willing to question NATO as much. Now is a good time to make those arguments.
Yeah, I think another one is the connection between immigration and foreign policy. And I think this is something that the left people are sometimes scared to say, because it can sound like you're demonizing immigrants. But it's that obviously, or saying you want less immigration, but like obviously the reason why there's so much immigration to Western Europe is because so much of the rest of the world, Africa and the Middle East, is in a terrible situation that people have to leave. And the number one reason why it's in a terrible situation that people have to leave is European and American foreign policy, is NATO foreign policy. And you can draw these connections. It's such an obvious thing. Why did Germany have a Syrian refugee crisis? Obviously, because we started a war in Syria. And if we start a war in Venezuela, there's already a Venezuelan refugee crisis, and it'll be worse. If we start a war in Mexico, there'll be a Mexican refugee crisis. Some of them will come to Europe. And I think people kind of shy away from that because it can sound like you're saying that we don't want immigration. But I think you can say it without saying that, without demonizing the immigrants, just to sort of change the narrative on it, and to get away from this omnipresent idea that immigrants are coming because they want what we have.
Yeah.
And it's most of the time, it's because we ruined their homeland in some way, either through wars or through the, neo-colonialist looting, including of French corporations in sub-Saharan Africa, obviously the colonial looting before that, and so on.
Yeah.
I just feel like I see this, everyone's talking about immigration in France. The public is extremely concerned about immigration. I think that means we should talk about it without accepting the right-wing, framing of it.
Yeah. Back in 2016, in the lead up to the 2017 elections and right off the cusp of the so-called massive wave of immigration to Europe in 2015, La France Insoumise was making those arguments, and they were saying, like, because of unfair trade agreements, because of foreign interventions, military interventions, and because of climate change exacerbating the effects of migration, we see that people unwillingly leave their homelands, to foreign countries, European countries, where it's difficult to integrate, where it's difficult to break the language barrier, it's difficult to get a job, there's discrimination, etc. So people, if they are faced with the choice, they probably would rather stay with their families and be together, and if they just had the economic opportunities, if Europe and North America didn't just pillage entire regions and in the Middle East and West Africa and Central Africa and all of its resources. All of their resources.
Exactly.
So,
But don't worry, we're going to make everything so bad here that they're going to want to go back. It's just, I might be going a little bit off topic here, but I don't know if you knew this, Flo, but you're about to pay more on your electricity bill this month because they've raised the tax on electricity to 20%.
What?
Why? I have no idea. Why do we pay when France makes all of its own electricity through investments that were made in nuclear power like 60 years ago? Why do we pay market price for electricity? No idea. But don't worry, they're gonna make it so fucking bad here that your 30% of your salary is gonna be spent on your state invested state power, nuclear power that you for some reason pay EU market prices on.
I just hope there's an exemption on that tax for data centers, for AI data super centers. I'm sure there will be some sort of exemption. You know how they're building those everywhere now? That's sort of the
they're doing that in backing it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The EU is backing these strategic investments in AI super centers. I forget what they call them.
Oh, you're right.
Super huge data centers. This is the future. We got it.
It's incredible. Well, I guess that probably does it for our episode on Venezuela, Greenland, the question of the European Union and farmers. I want to thank Flo for coming on. Really appreciate it, and we'll hopefully you'll come back soon.
Thanks, Liam. Thanks, Patrick.
And if you made it this far, don't forget to put your email in our little newsletter thing. I think we're almost up to 10 people or something like that, and you'll be the first to get notified when we have a new video of a burning American flag or
hell yeah,
or whatever else comes up in the future. All right, that does it for us. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
I hate America very deeply. The economic repression of the masses institutionalized. I hate America very deeply. I hate America very deeply. The economic repression of the masses institutionalized. I hate America very deeply.